Hey guys, it's Casey and welcome back for part 11 of our tower defense tutorial. So what we're going to set up today is we are going to set up some of the visuals and audio components of our tower. So right now our tower is simply just a mesh that sits still and it spawns our projectile and our projectile goes at our enemy. But let's set up some more of the visual aspects of it. So let's set up some of the particles associated with it. So what I want to do is we want to spawn an emitter, and what an emitter needs is it needs a particle system. So under our tower struct, I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call this our, let's call this our shooting particle. And what we're going to do is we are going to grab a particle system object reference. And then what we can now do is we can go inside of our tower data table, and we can make the shooting particle whatever we would like. So for the bush, let's make it like an explosion. Sure, that works for me. I'm just grabbing from the default particles that come with the top-down project with the starter content. So we're going to set one to be explosion and one to smoke. And what we can do inside of our tower is that when we spawn our projectile, let's also spawn our emitter. So now that we have if we grab this, move this around a little bit, there we go. So from our tower struct, we now have our shooting particle. So what we can do inside of here is we can spawn emitter at location, and we can grab our emitter, plugs in nicely. So with certain things, with spawning emitters or audio and stuff like that, you want to make sure on the location, when you highlight it, you want to check to see if it's going to be in world space or local space. There's a few nodes where they might not be obvious at first, so whenever I start spawning things like emitters, sound, stuff like that, I always check real quick. I never remember. This one's world space, so what we can do is we can get the actor location of our tower. What we're going to do after this is we are going to set up more specific locations for spawning, but that works for me. So now our bush should spawn an explosion when it shoots, and our chair should smoke when it shoots. So let's see if that works. So let's hit play. Let's go over. Let's create a bush, and let's see if it... Yep, there we go. You can see when it shoots the projectile, we get our explosion. Now once again, for your game, this is up to you. If you want a shooting projectile, if you want smoke to come out, you want some flashy thing to happen, that's up to you. How about, what do we got here? Is pending kill from node, kill function from node, lower lives. Let's see. So we're lowering lives, and, okay. So, okay, I've said about this before. When you destroy actors, make sure you run the code before you destroy the actor. That is my mistake here. Let's not do that. Okay, so now that should fix that issue. The runner was hitting the end of our level. This is inside of our spawner. That's our finishing line. Our runner was going into the finishing line, and we were trying to lower our lives by the runner's life total, but we were destroying him right before we were lowering the lives, so that was the issue there. So that fixes that little error that popped up. But that's how we can spawn a particle effect. It's super simple to set this up. So let's set up an audio effect to go with that particle effect. So let's go back into our tower struct. Let's make a new variable. Let's call it our shooting audio. Our shooting sound is probably better. Shooting sound, and what we need to change this to be is a sound cue. If you don't know what a sound cue is, I'm going to pull one up in 1 second. So let's set our sound cue to be, I think there's an explosion one that'll match the explosion, and we could set the chair to be, I don't know, like a fire one, sure. So if we open up our explosion sound cue here, this is what the inside of a sound cue looks like, and normally when you use audio inside of the engine, you don't want to use just a normal WAV file. A lot of times you can't just use the raw file. Normally what you need to do is you need to put it into a sound cue, and then with the sound cue you get a bunch of attenuation controls. You can see here, I believe this randomizes between these two explosion sounds. So if I do, I'm not sure if you can hear this, I have the audio turned really down on the recording, because before it's been super loud before. I'm going to up it just slightly, and then when I hit play, I can hear that. I'm actually going to turn it down just slightly because I think that the sound levels are blimping pretty high there. But that's how sound cue works. This is the inside of it. Here it's just randomizing between the two of them. It's using a modulator to, I believe, randomize some of the audio levels to it. But that's what the inside of a sound cue looks like. That's what we're selecting inside the table. So now inside of our tower, along with spawning our projectile and our emitter, let's spawn our audio. So what we can do is we can play sound at location. So play sound at location works for me. What is the location? It is world position, so we can get the actor location again, and we can plug in our sound. There's one thing that I'm just going to assume that's going to happen here. When I looked at the default settings inside of this, our camera is really far out, right? Like we're a few thousand units above the level away from our towers. I could see inside of our explosion queue, it had its fall off distance set to 1800. That means that I believe beyond 1800 units away from the sound where we play it, you cannot hear it. So I'm just going to increase that to like 5,000 so we can hear it in our level. So now when I hit play, and oops, did we hook up that one node to it? I actually forget. Did we hook that up? Yes, we did. Okay, so we hooked up our sound into the sound and the location works. Okay. So let's create our tower again and let's spawn. And for me, I can hear that. It looks like the audio levels are coming through on that. So we're playing our emitter and we're spawning our projectile. That works for me. So like we just did with that, we can set up so many different ways of having our audio come through. With this, if we wanted to, we could create another sound cue here. So let's actually set that up, and we'll call this our impact sound. And we're going to feed this to our projectile. Sound cue works. That is the right class for it to be. And now with our impact sound, what's a good one here? Let's see. What does a fire spark sound like? Let's see. That is really not obvious. That's not going to work. What about... Maybe we'll just... No, I don't want to reuse the explosion sound. Let's see. What does the steam cue sound like? That's also not very loud. So I guess I'm not going to care. That's a really long sound cue. What the heck? Oh, it's looping. That is an issue. We don't want to use that. So I'm just going to go back. I think I'm just going to use fire. Is that looping? It is looping. Gosh, that's annoying. Collapse. Collapse probably isn't looping. There, that works. That is... okay, that is an interesting sound file. So with that sound file, I'm just going to set that to be the impact sound for my projectile. I'm going to set it to be both. I'm not too worried about that part. So what we're going to do is now inside of our tower, when we spawn our projectile, let's tell our projectile what our impact sound will be. So let's open up our projectile. I'm going to browse to it, open it up, and I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call this our impact sound cue. And we're going to change this to be a variable type of sound cue. And now we want to expose this on spawn and make it instance editable. And now back inside of our tower, to get that new expose on spawn variable we just made, we need to refresh this. So we need to set it back to none and then set it back to be tower projectile, and you can see we get our new sound cue. Let's plug that in, and now our projectile knows what its impact sound should be, and it literally is just as simple as where we do our impact. So where are we doing our impact? We're doing it right here, and we're actually also doing it right here where we're impacting the last known location. So what I actually am going to do to reuse that code is I'm going to create a new custom event, and I'm going to call it impact. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put both the destroy actor and the play sound at location both inside this impact so that we can reuse that code. And what is our sound? Well, it is this impact. And where are we doing it? We're doing it at our actor's location. So get actor location. And then I'm going to call that here because this is where we were impacting with our target. And then I'm also going to do it here. And this was when our target was dead, but where we're hitting his last known location. So I'm going to call that code again. I'm going to delete that destroy actor. And now we just reuse some of our code. Just makes that a little bit cleaner. And now, in our game, when our projectile hits the enemy, we should be feeding it that crumbling noise, that really god-awful, really long crumbling noise. So I can hear it. That is a jumbled mess of audio. I'm not sure if that's coming through, but that is a mess. But that's the sound files that we are working with in this starter project. But I'm just trying to articulate this is really how easy it is to set up your tower variables. Whatever you want your tower to have. If you want an emitter to be constantly playing over top of your tower just while it's in the world, you can set it up inside of this. If you want some audio while your projectile is flying through the air, you could use it just like this. Make a new, go inside of your struct, make a new variable, say what it is inside the tower, and then with this tower struct variable, you now have access to it, and you can set up whatever you would like. So this is what I'm trying to articulate. I'm not going to go through every single case of what your tower might need, but I think I'm trying to make this fairly obvious, and I'm trying to show step by step. This is how you can just add things to your tower. This is how you can add more to your game. Let's see. We are 10 minutes in, so we have plenty of time. Let's add some more functionality. Let's say right now our towers, they don't rotate. They don't target our enemy and change and move and like aim towards it. So let's set that up. So inside of our tower, I know that we would do that on tick. So this is just so happens to be set up that on tick, if we have a target, we were doing our shooting code. Not only will we do our shooting code, let's set our rotation. So let's set target rotation on a new custom event. Let's call it here, set target rotation. And we're calling this on tick. If we have a target, let's set our tower's rotation. So this is the event. What is our end result? We're going to set actor rotation of our tower. And what do we want to rotate at? We want to rotate at our target. There just so happens to be a node called get. It's called look at, what is it? Find look at rotation. That's what it is. And this is really simple. It's going to find a rotation based on a starting point and an ending point. Well, what's our starting point? It is our tower. So we can get actor location of our tower. And what is our target? Well, our target point is the actor location of our target. So that's simple. Now, whenever we have a target, we should be rotating our mesh to aim at our target. So let's see if it works. So let's start. With the bush, it might not be very obvious, so we might need to set up the chair. Let's set up 2 bushes and let's see if, yep, we can see it very obviously. See how our towers are rotating to match our target? God, that audio is really miserable. I'm going to turn that down just a little bit. Sorry, that audio is really miserable. Let's also set up a chair. So now with our chair set up, let's see if our chair also rotates to aim. Yep, there we go. That looks good to me. So that's how we can set up aiming rotation. But what if we didn't want our tower to rotate? Say we wanted some towers to rotate, but other towers not to rotate. Well, we can go inside of our struct. We can make a new variable. We can make it a Boolean, and we can call it should rotate. And now, let's put this above all of our meshes. And now what we can do is inside of our data table, we can say bush, we don't want you to rotate, but chair, we do want you to rotate towards your target. And then with that set up, we could go inside of our tower, we can grab our tower struct, we can break it, and we can grab that Boolean out of it and do a branch here and say, hey, should we be rotating? The bush will no longer rotate, but our chair should be rotating. So let's try that out. Why is that going away from me? There we go. Set up the bush, and now our bush should not rotate. That works. And then our chair, because we had that Boolean set to be true, it will rotate. So I mean, this is how easy it is, guys. I'm trying to articulate. Once you get your base framework set up in your game, which that's what we did for like the first 7 episodes, adding all this little extra on top of it and getting it to behave more like a game and getting it to look cooler and sound cooler, that stuff comes with time. That stuff comes from practice. Not practice, but just trying an emitter, trying something else, trying this, trying that. So it really just comes with time. Let's see. Now we're only 13 minutes in. Let's set up some more functionality. So let's say, instead of this just being a bush, let's say we had something like a barrel coming out of our mesh. Like we had this specific spot that we wanted our projectiles and our emitters to come out of our tower. We just don't want it to come from dead center of our tower. What you can do is that if we open up our mesh, inside of this area, what we can do is we can add a socket. And normally when you add sockets, when I'm used to doing sockets, I'm used to adding them to skeletal meshes. Say you're working with a first-person shooter. What you would normally do is you would add a socket inside of the palm of your player's hand, and what you can do is you can attach that gun to the socket, and that's what keeps the gun center in the hand. So when the hand moves, the gun moves with it. We can also use sockets for our towers. So what we can do is if we want to, let's see, how do we add sockets here? I've never actually added a socket to a normal static mesh. Let's see here. Let's see, mesh, collision. How can we add a socket? Let's see. There's got to be a button here somewhere. Socket manager. There we go. So in the bottom right on this details panel, we have create socket. I've actually never done this for a static mesh. So let's create a socket, and let's call this our, we could call it our shooting location. We could call it our, Yeah, let's call it our shooting socket. Let's call it projectile. Yeah, I guess shooting socket. Name it something that is obvious for you, and that's what I'm trying to articulate here. So what I can do is I can drag this. Say we had like an exit point at the top of our bush. We can move our shooting socket there, and that we can now reference this inside of our tower. What we can also do is that we can set this up for our chair. So if we find our chair mesh, we might have to search for it. So let's search for chair. So inside of our chair mesh, let's set up that same exact socket. So let's name it the same exact thing. It's very, very important to name it the same exact thing. We will call this our shooting socket. That's what we called it, shooting socket, yep. Let's have our projectile come out of, let's say, the front of our chair. We want it to come out of like this front bit, right in the front. So now what we can do is that we can reference inside of our tower blueprint, we can reference this shooting socket and we can spawn our projectile exactly on that socket. And as long as we keep the same naming convention across all of our towers, the socket will just work. So what we can do is now, instead of getting our actor location to spawn our projectiles and to spawn our emitters and stuff like that, we can get socket location of our tower mesh. And now what it wants is it wants the socket name. And what did we call it? We called it our shooting socket. So now we can say shooting socket. And now we have the location on our tower of that socket. So what I need to do is I need to feed in a transform. So instead of getting actor transform, what we want to do is we want to make a transform, and rotation scale, that's fine with me. We just need to plug in the location. And then with this, I want to move it here, and let's actually use that same node for our emitter and our sound location. So let's see if it works. Anything else to set up? I think that's it. So now when we hit play, I'm going to set up the bush, and now instead of our projectile starting from the middle of our bush or the exact center of our bush, we should be spawning it from, I believe, just above it. So I'm going to hit spawn. Let's actually move another bush back here. I'm going to hit spawn, and to get closer, I'm going to hit eject, and now let's see. That does not look like it's coming from our socket location, so let's see what's going on there. I'm going to hit pause, and let's see. Why is that not working? So if we do our debug, and we grab our tower, that is coming from, let's see here. This is a world location, and this projectile, did it want a local? I don't believe it wanted a local, because what were we doing before? Let's see here. This location is 167. That looks right to me. That looks right to me. So why were we not spawning it where we wanted it to? Let's see here. If I hit stop and I highlight this spawn transform, that looks like that should be a world location. That looks right. Maybe I put this too close to the bush and it's not obvious. Let's set this to be like really high above our bush. Let's do that. So let's try that. And let's see here. Let's actually look inside of our projectile. Were we overriding something inside of our projectile? We were moving from our current location towards our target. That looks fine to me. Inside of our tower, we're spawning the projectile at the socket location in the world, and yep. So let's try this one more time, and let's see now, is it spawning way far above our bush? We offset that socket location really far. Let's see if that works now. If we eject, where is it coming from? That's still coming from dead center of our mesh. What is going on here? From our tower mesh, which is, if we grab that, that should be our bush. And from our bush, we are getting the shooting socket. And from the shooting socket, we are getting its location. Are we? Let's see. Where's the tower location? Whoa, why did that do that? That was freaky looking. Let's see. Where is this location? So we're actually not getting the socket. It's not finding the socket is what that means to me. Otherwise, it will return the components transform in world space. So this isn't getting the socket. So if socket is found, we're not finding the socket. So let's hit stop. So inside of our bush, it is called shooting socket. I called it socket. I need to delete that H. It should be socket. So, wow. The small things matter, guys. The small things really do matter. So let's hit play again. I'm going to recreate my bush. Let's put it down. And now if we hit spawn and we look, our projectile comes from that socket location. So that looks good. But I'm kind of seeing... What do we have our particle set as? Spawn emitter, shooting socket. That isn't finding the location now. This seems to be, wait, no, wait. Negative 1320. Why is that returning? So this is weird. We are getting the location because we're spawning our box there, but we don't seem to be spawning our emitter. What was the emitter for the bush? Wasn't it the explosion? Yes, it is the explosion. So why are we not getting the explosion now? Let's see here. 592. Okay, no, that is right. That is the location of our tower. 592 is not the Z of our tower. It's 167. So it's getting the socket location properly, but I'm not seeing the explosion. I'm going to guess we're not seeing the explosion because the explosion is happening inside of the cube. Just to check to make sure, I'm going to add to this vector, and I'm just going to add like 50 to it. So we're going to offset, just for testing purposes, the location of our projectile and the location of our emitter. I just want to make sure that that is right because that I was not seeing an explosion. Yes, okay. So that was the issue. I could see the explosions. They were just happening inside of each other, and that's just because the projectile is a bit too big. But this is how we can set up where exactly we want our spawning to happen. And just as I did this in the static mesh, this works exactly the same in skeletal meshes if your towers are skeletal meshes. Use the same exact process. So now we have a 21-minute video. I think that's pretty good. I guess I will talk very briefly. I don't want to make it, but I guess I can talk about it. If you have issues with your tower being offset, say you might be using different sized towers or something of that sort, or say the origin of your towers are different, so that maybe some of your towers, the origin is offset so that like the tower's accidentally spawning underneath where your tower should be. What you can store is we could store a variable inside of our struct, and we could call this our offset, like our Z offset if we wanted to. And then what you could do is you could make this a float, or actually let's just make it a vector. And then what you could do in the tower, you could say, okay, I know my mesh is spawning like 100 units in the ground. You could save your Z offset to be 100, and that what you just need to do is that inside of our UI where we spawn our tower, so inside of our tower selector widget where we spawn our tower, you just need to make sure that we spawn the location to be, actually no, where we set it onto our mouse. We don't want to care where our spawning widget is, we care our ghost tower. So inside of our ghost tower, where we are putting our mesh to our mouse, we just want to change the snap location, and we just want to add to it that Z offset, and the same thing inside of our actual tower, where you spawn the tower. Actually, no, that would also be inside the ghost tower. Both would be inside the ghost tower. So where we move our ghost tower onto our mouse, the set actor location, we would just want to add to that Z offset. And then where we spawn the actual tower when we left click in this transform, we would also want to add that offset here. And that's how you can deal with maybe if some of your meshes are offset from each other. That's how you would fix it there. Say your tower was made up of multiple meshes. Maybe you had a base tier tower and you had a top tier tower. This is how you would also do that. But within your tower, you would need to set up 2 static meshes, and that you would just need to, inside of the struct, set up a second offset, and you would call it Z offset of top or something like that. And you just need to offset the static mesh there also. So that's how we can set up more visuals with our towers. I guess this episode was all about. It's super simple, audio, emitters, all the good stuff. You should probably be setting up, maybe you want more emitters in your game. It's really just thinking about where do I want to spawn them, going inside the struct, making the new emitter, making the new sound, and spawning it where you need it to be. Super simple. So guys, I hope you learned something. I hope you're starting to see how easy it can be to start adding more functionality. And we will I'll think of some more things to do. I think I would definitely want to show experience and how we can do a simple experience system, and we'll do tower upgrades. That might be the last 2 things we do for the game, or for at least for our tutorial. So I hope you guys stick around, and we'll do that in the next video.